rotary disc valve vertical twin was the forerunner to the next generation of three-cylinder two-stroke Kawasaki's that followed. It produced 31 horsepower and weighed around 150 kilos dry. This is another motorcycle the factory claimed 100 mile an hour for, and with tuning it would go beyond that. But the best confirmed test I could find gave it a top speed of 93 mile an hour standard, although the conditions weren't great. Suffice to say that its place on this list was secured, because without it we may never have had the later triples. Now, I just want to note here that this is the time when one of the incredible bikes to follow in this list was first seen as a prototype. Just remember that, and how far ahead of its time it was when I talk about it later. For the next 5 years, despite all efforts and all the research and development, no new 250s came to market that challenged the performance of the Kawasaki A1 Samurai or the then aging CB72. So in reality, we had had almost 14 years with no new 250cc motorcycles that were able to break the 100 mile an hour barrier. Kawasaki released the A7 Avenger, one of Japan's earliest 350cc street bikes. This simple and reliable two-stroke disc valve parallel twin was fast enough to get the designers of every other Japanese manufacturer looking for answers. The engine was identical to the A1 Samurai in every way except for the oversized barrels, pistons and head that gave it the extra capacity. Unlike most two-strokes of the time, as well as the oil that was fed in with the fuel, additional oil was injected directly into the main bearings of the crank journals. In another breakthrough, in 1969, it became one of the first motorcycles to do away with points and use a capacitor discharge-based ignition system, an innovation we have all appreciated over the years, I'm sure. Although it wasn't as simple as adding the extra cylinder like they might have hoped, the A7 Avenger engine was vital to Kawasaki when designing the 500cc triple engine for the H1. This motorcycle would smash all the molds. It was the Kawasaki H1 Mach 3, a 500cc two-stroke triple designed to be the fastest motorcycle on the market. As you all told me, this motorcycle should have probably featured in the Dangerous Motorcycles video, which I will link above. Kawasaki knew that Honda had something big coming. They almost certainly knew some of the details of the CB750 project. They had their own big four-stroke in the pipeline, but the Z900 wasn't going to be ready. In the background, a project had been planned, and they'd been experimenting with inline and L triples. They decided on an inline three-cylinder two-stroke and were determined to make it the most powerful production bike available to steal Honda's thunder. As such, shortly after the release of the CB750, the first Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 rolled into dealerships. The CB750 was big, powerful, comfortable and refined. The Kawasaki was only one of those things. It was built for one purpose: speed. It quickly established itself as the top dog when it came to speed. The engine produced around 60 horsepower standard, and the torque was around 55 newton meters, so it was significantly more powerful than the T500. But all the power was produced in a really narrow rev range. That meant the throttle had only two settings, all or nothing. The design had been thrown together in a total of just 14 months, which meant very little research and no development had been done other than the engine. The chassis was poor, the suspension had the stiffness of cooked spaghetti, and the brakes might have well have not existed. But customers didn't care. They wanted the power. Whatever the consequences were, whatever drawbacks the final motorcycle had. With a weight of just 175 kilos dry, the monster of an engine could propel this motorcycle to the end of a quarter-mile strip in just 12 seconds, and could take it up to a claimed top speed of 124 miles an hour. Just a note here, the Honda CB750 had a claimed top speed of 123.6 miles an hour. So the 124 mile an hour claimed speed of the Kawasaki was very convenient. The reality is, both were fairly hopeful for a showroom bike, but the two-stroke tuners would make sure that the H1 was always first in the queue at the drag strip. The bike was raw, noisy, smelly, uneconomical and dangerous to ride, and customers loved them. With the possible exception of the AJS Porcupine, this was the fastest 500cc motorcycle ever put into production. It would retain that title right through the 1970s and much of the 1980s. In 1971, when Kawasaki first built the H2, they didn't just tear up the rulebook, they burnt it to ashes. Their only focus was speed. It was the fastest production bike in the world at the time, producing over 75 horsepower, but it was a handful to ride. The frame flexed like a fishing rod and the brakes were inadequate at best and downright dangerous in the wet. These traits earned it its nickname the Widowmaker. 75 horsepower might not seem much by the standards of today, but the 77 Newton meters of torque hit like a sledgehammer at 6,500 RPM. Later models after 1974 got reworked geometry and a longer swinging arm, which did make it a little more manageable, but it never handled well. The Kawasaki KDX 200 is a one-of-a-kind dirt bike and a force to be reckoned with on the trails. Weighing in at 109 kilos or 240 pounds, the KDX 200 is incredibly agile. Its lightweight chassis and engine allow for quick and precise handling, making it a perfect choice for tackling challenging off-road terrain. The Kawasaki KDX 200 is equipped with, shall we say, a robust two-stroke single-cylinder engine. It delivers an impressive 37 horsepower and with a positive 6-speed gearbox has performance comparable to many bigger bikes. Top speed with standard gearing varied over the years, but in general is around 70 to 75 miles an hour. But this is a motorcycle where top speed gets a bit irrelevant. It's the low-end torque where the motorcycle wins every time. Its downside is that you will pay at the fuel pump, with only about 20 to 30 miles per gallon depending on your throttle hand. The precise details of the engine and specifications vary slightly depending on the model year, but there were no bad years. Some were just better than others. Be assured, it packs a punch. The engine's designed to give you a great big lump of low-end torque, and so acceleration's fantastic, giving you the power you need to conquer any trail with a smile, even as a beginner. Whether you're tearing through the dirt, splashing through mud, or blazing through gravel, the KDX 200's engine will keep you thoroughly entertained. In terms of practicality, the KDX 200 is built to handle more than just off-road trails. While it excels in the dirt, it can handle city traffic and country lanes too. Its versatility makes it a great choice for riders who want a motorcycle that can handle everyday riding as well as off-road adventures. Whether you're riding through the woods, exploring mountain trails, or even navigating through the city, the KDX 200 is more than up to the task. The KDX 200 is comfortable for a dirt bike and easy to control. Its high riding position gives a commanding view of the trail ahead, without a seat height made for giants. The well-designed suspension gives you a smooth and enjoyable ride too, even on rough terrain. The KDX 200 is built to handle the challenges of all but the most extreme enduro environments, and it's easier to pick up than most bikes on the trails. Whether you're an experienced off-road rider or a newcomer to the world of dirt bikes, the Kawasaki KDX 200 will leave you smiling in places others fear to tread. Now, Kawasaki built a fantastic motorcycle with the KX125. It had a stronger low-end pickup, but unusually for Kawasaki, it just lacked a little at the top end. As a motorcycle for the average Joe, that made it perfect. It just didn't have that little extra to make it in competition against the rest. In Europe, it would take Kawasaki until 1996 to win the championship, although they did get a win in the States in 1984. How much this was down to the bikes and how much to the riders is a question that may never be answered. The Kawasaki KX250 has a long history behind it. It was first introduced in 1974 as a two-stroke and won many championships across the globe, but Kawasaki finally had to pull the plug on the two-stroke engine in 2008. The engine was replaced with an all-new powerful four-stroke 249cc single-cylinder double overhead cam engine, which now produces over 44 horsepower. The updated 2023 model has further improved the performance of this bike with an even stronger mid-range pull, making it a competitive motocross bike as well as king of the dual sport market. The engine now has better performance across the whole rev range. It pulls harder from low revs, but still revs out well, allowing the bike to get that silky smooth power down in the deepest of ruts. With a strong extended mid-range, it's just as happy tearing along trails as it is taking off over jumps at the local MX track. In 1978, the rumours started about an all-new Kawasaki motocross bike, built to challenge for the Open Class title. In 1979, we started to see what the bike could do. Although Brad Lackey won more single races than anyone else on the new Kawasaki, they failed to take the title, but a monster was in the making. After 3 more years of development, in 1983, Kawasaki unleashed the fire-breathing KX500 motocross bike. The press described it as violent and unrideable, with a 500cc two-stroke single producing around 65 horsepower. It was considered to be at the absolute limit of usable power off-road, and it stayed in production for over 20 years, from 1983 to 2004. It became the benchmark by which all of the big bore dirt bikes were judged. The KX500 was an immensely powerful bike, and weighing in at just 105 kilos or 230 pounds, it had an incredible power-to-weight ratio. Unlike the TM400 Suzuki we featured in the Dangerous Motorcycles video linked at the end, the strength was there with the Kawasaki, as well as the power. Part of the weight loss regime had been the implementation of the race-developed Unitrack rear suspension, but it seemed like every engineering decision had been carefully considered to either save weight or increase power. King of the big bore dirt bikes, the KX500 dominated motocross for over a decade and still retains its unrivaled reputation to this day. The KR250 had been built as a prototype in 1970. You could say that means when it was released the tech was out of date, but it wasn't. This was an incredible design that had been prototyped and tested in the world of racing, and it was unbeatable. The engine was groundbreaking in many ways, and the tandem twin-cylinder engine was arranged with 2 single-cylinder engines placed one behind the other, with the crankshafts connected by large gears. Originally, they used a 180-degree firing order, but this was redesigned so the pistons rose and fell together, which actually decreased the problems of vibration that the earlier engines had suffered from. The exhaust from the front cylinder was routed centrally under the front of the engine, with the rear exiting under the seat, which allowed a greater lean angle. The engine was fed by 2 rotary disc valves. The engine made the motorcycle really narrow, and it was much smaller and more aerodynamic than most of its competitors. First developed by the great Yvon Duhamel it was in the hands of Corky Ballington and Anton Mang that Kawasaki won both the 250 and 350 titles in 1978, 79 and 81, winning a total of 8 titles in just 5 years, with 4 Constructors' Championships thrown in for good measure. The more I look into this bike, the more I realise I think I'm going to have to do a video just about this motorcycle. Its development and the advances it brought to the world of two-stroke engine technology are fascinating. The KR250 was made as a production bike for just 3 years, from 1984 to 1986. At the end of its illustrious racing career, released in 1988, was the Kawasaki KR1. Kawasaki had moved on to a more standard parallel twin engine from the tandem twin of the KR250. The KR1 engine produced 55 horsepower, and the bike weighed in at just 123 kilos dry, making it both lighter and more powerful than the Suzuki. Top speed, in line with Suzuki, was also claimed to be 130 miles an hour, but it is the only motorcycle on this list where the claimed top speed was routinely beaten in real-world testing. The bike was tested at 131 miles an hour on numerous occasions, and on some tests it went significantly faster. One test from a relatively reliable magazine showed a staggering 136 miles an hour top speed. This was a raw, visceral motorcycle with no frills, and the rider experience was extreme. Below 40 miles an hour, the power delivery was as uneven as a sawtooth blade, but once the engine was over 7,000 RPM, it took off like a scolded cat with fireworks attached to its tail. That didn't stop either. The engine would rev and rev until it passed the maximum power at 10,500 RPM, where the power gently dipped until around 11,000 RPM, rather than falling off a cliff like the RGV did. This made it so much easier to ride fast that it became the bike of choice for production racers in the 250cc class overnight. Steering was razor sharp, and this motorcycle even made the TZR look big in comparison. Something else didn't stop. That was the research and development department at Kawasaki. By 1990 they improved the KR1 even more, and we got the incredible Kawasaki KR1S. Weight was up a fraction at 131 kilos, but power had been increased to 59 horsepower too. The power band was pushed higher, and the KR1S didn't come alive until over 7,500 RPM. Under 3,000 RPM, it was described kindly as useless by one journalist. And I have to acknowledge, this was not a motorcycle for poodling around on. It was a motorcycle built purely for speed, with steering so sharp even some professional racers found it hard to handle. This really was as close as you could get to a race bike for the road. Despite Kawasaki still only claiming 130 miles an hour top speed, it was regularly tested at over 135 miles an hour, with one test even reaching 139 miles an hour, from a 250. It became the fastest mass-produced 250cc motorcycle for the road, and 35 years after the KR1 was first unveiled, it is still considered one of the purest road-going race bikes ever built. Kawasaki's ZX-10RR was king of the superbikes for many years, and the latest ZX-10RR produces 214 horsepower and is limited to around 190 miles per hour. The best 0 to 60 time I could find was 2.9 seconds, with the average around 3.1 seconds, and the quarter mile time was 9.98 seconds, but with an exit speed of 151 miles an hour. Prices come in at around £25,000 in the UK and $30,000 in the USA. The Kawasaki H2 and H2R. Kawasaki have rewritten the rulebook many times, and the H2 name has a long history, which I did talk about in the first Dangerous Motorcycles video linked above. Even the standard H2 will now do over 200 miles an hour. But the H2R is long gone, with a recognised top speed of 240 miles an hour. Now let's be clear, this is no ordinary motorcycle. There is absolutely nothing normal about this bike, except that it has 2 wheels and an engine. And that engine is what makes the Kawasaki H2. The H2R is not a road-going motorcycle, but it has to be mentioned. Powered by a unique 1000cc supercharged inline-4 engine that produces around 200 horsepower in the standard models and over 300 horsepower on the R models, this really is an astonishing piece of engineering. That power means every last component of the engine needed a stronger solution. The H2 and H2R are both masterpieces of engineering prowess that solidify the position Kawasaki once had as the king of Japanese high-power engine manufacturers. Now, I've listened to hardened racers talk about how, without the tech, the H2R would be unrideable, and both the H2 and H2R are dripping with tech from front to rear. Even if I just listed the different items, the video would be an hour long, and to explain what some of the tech actually does would be another story entirely. The H2 is tame, yes, but it could never be described as tame. There is a difference. It produces its power lower, and so is just as much of a missile as its track-based brother. It has more power than any of us could use on the road, even if it was pulling a trailer. Let's be clear, there are very few H2 or H2R owners that will ever ride them at wide open throttle. And even if they did, the various electronic systems on board would dial that power out in 99 out of 100 situations. This is a prestige bike for people who want to be noticed. If that's your thing, then fine, you need to look no further. Price for the H2 is about £25,000 in the UK and around $30,000 in the USA. For the H2R model, UK price is around £50,000 and in the USA that's around $57,000.